Hey, this is Dan with the Video Game Collecting Podcast. Hey, this is Dan with the Video Game Collecting Podcast. Today's a very special interview with Valerie. She runs the Heritage auctions and is awesome. How you doing, Valerie?
I'm good, Dan. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you today.
Oh, thanks for coming on and sharing some perspective. So as we usually do, let's go into your video game background. Before you're running Heritage video games, back when you're there playing video games, how was your video game childhood?
Well, I mean, I guess I would just say that I've been playing video games since I was old enough to talk and ask for the controller from my half-brother. And my first console was actually a Game Boy Color, well, my first personal one anyway. I started out on my own with Pokemon, and the love affair continued throughout the rest of my life, so never really stopped playing, at least not for too long.
What was your favorite first game? Like the first game you're like, I love this game.
Pokemon Blue. I couldn't put it down as a kid. It was hard to get me to do anything else. I remember at one point my mom signed me up for tennis lessons because she wanted to try and get me to get moving. I don't even know why she picked tennis, but I remember I would just sit there in between practice rounds just trying to battle more Pokemon, and she was getting so frustrated because I wasn't like getting into what she had signed me up to do. Yeah, I mean, they just really couldn't pull me away from it.
Oh wow! So after, had to be a learning lesson for your mother. Like, you can try, but you can't break me. You know?
Right? Yeah. I mean, she's come around since then, of course, but you know.
So, what after the Game Boy Color was your first individual, like your personal home console? You know, is there a system that was really your first? If it's N64, GameCube, what was the first one that you were like, hey, I really enjoy getting games for this system?
So I think when I was around 5 or 6, I had asked for a PlayStation, but I guess I hadn't realized that it was mainly for like older kids. So my brother ended up playing console a lot more than I did, and eventually they got around to getting me a Nintendo 64, which was a bit more my speed. I mean, of course, you know, I love the games on the PlayStation, don't get me wrong. Like, I definitely spent my the fair share of my time with Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon, but there were a lot of other games on that console that I didn't really touch as much as the ones on the Nintendo 64.
Gotcha. So from there, when did you really start collecting? Like, when was it that you're like, hey, I want to get this game, and just because of the condition, pay more for it?
I would say probably sometime in college. I had become really interested in Resident Evil, the series, and I remember trying to track down some copies for playing. And I remember I was having a really hard time finding a copy in relatively good condition, and that just sort of piqued my interest. I mean, I'd always been sort of a collector at heart. You know, throughout my childhood, I collected Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and I really cared about the condition as far as that was concerned. But I guess as far as video games go, it didn't really dawn on me that I could apply those same collector's interests to those until I was, roughly in college.
Nice. So from there, you know, you get into the Resident Evil. Where did that journey kind of lead you? When did you say like, oh, I have a collection, and, you know, where did it go from there?
It was probably a few years later where I started to recognize it as a legitimate collection. I had been mainly focusing on GameCube. You know, going through my parents' house, I started to find some complete in box Game Boy games that I hadn't even realized that I had hung on to, and that sort of led me down the path of collecting, you know, games that are a little bit harder to keep in nice shape, the ones that are packaged in cardboard boxes and the like. So I started to pick up my childhood favorite NES and Game Boy games. yeah, that's pretty much where it went after that. And, eventually that in one way or another led me to Heritage. So, yeah, then the rest is history, I guess.
And the end of the interview. So what was your kind of methods of, before we get to the heritage part, what were your methods of finding games? Was it eBay? Was it local shops?
Yeah, I mean, I would look around at local shops, but I often had much better luck with eBay. I wasn't really part of any online collecting communities or anything like that. I guess it just never dawned on me to seek that out. My involvement with the community at large didn't really happen until after I came on at Heritage.
Right on. How did Heritage come about? You're there collecting, you're getting a lot of stuff you're enjoying. How did that come about?
Like, how was I brought on at Heritage?
Yeah, obviously I haven't been hired on by Heritage, so like, how did that? But no, I just meant like, how did that come to be? When did they reach out to you? Did you know somebody who they were looking for somebody to get into this arena? There was not a video game part of Heritage till Valarie made it a thing. So how did that come to be?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. Sorry, I just wanted to be sure I was answering.
No. Yeah, no, sure, for sure.
So yeah, I did know someone, or do know someone rather, that worked at Heritage, and I had been talking to them, around the time that Wata started working with Heritage, and I told them that I was interested in collecting and shared different aspects of my collection with them, and they said, well, you should reach out. So I had a little bit of an in there, and I reached out, and they said, yeah, write up a business proposal and tell us what you think the possibilities of this category will be and how you plan to run it, and we'll meet with you. So they liked what they heard, so I came on part-time for a while. Well, really, it didn't take very long for the job to kind of grow beyond part-time needs, and then I ended up coming on full-time.
It's funny because I'm thinking of this business plan. I imagine if myself was asked to come up with a business plan, I know on a single sheet of paper and crayon, it would be sell video games. But I'm sure you put a lot more work than I, but no. So, you get hired on, you're starting that up. How was that process of getting games in? I think that would be a hard, was that just came naturally for people to be like, we want to sell games with Heritage? Or how was it trying to get, because I'm guessing that's the biggest hurdle is, well, buyers and sellers, but getting the inventory.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there were a few consigners who started out with us because they knew that we were going to be offering video games soon. After that, once we started offering them, it just sort of snowballed from there.
Now, it starts snowballing. Was the catalyst to really make this hobby explode? Do you see it as that $114,000 sale? I mean, what was that a moment? When was the moment when your bosses came to you, be like, okay, what do you need? Like, what do you need? What can we get you? Or were they already all in before that?
They had a lot of faith in the market from the very beginning. I think that was the reason why they brought me on, was because, they knew that was going to be popular, so to speak. And, but I think that the results that really showed how much potential this collectible had were the results of the Carolina Collection auction in November 2019. When that Mega Man sold for an all-in price of $75,000, it really exceeded their expectations on what kind of potential this market had in the short term. Since then, it's just every auction has pretty much been outperforming the last.
Being that we have a Mega Man in this auction, is it kind of like a full circle thing to see it come back, see a nice copy come back to market, and where the market is now from when it started? I mean, that's quite the journey. I mean, exploded in such a short period. Is it something that's surprising you still, or is it something you almost at this point expect it to keep pushing, at this rate?
I would say I'm not shocked, but I do still find lots of surprises in what I do and the results that we have. For example, with the new Mega Man, I had a feeling it would outperform the first, even if it was a different variant. It's primarily just because, there's been so much involvement. And looking back at the results we've had since the Carolina collection, the kind of activity we've seen on the Mega Man has been pretty much in line with comparable games we've offered from the Carolina collection since then. More than anything, it's just surprised me how quickly interest in this collectible and involvement has jumped over the past couple of years. I definitely didn't anticipate things to be where they are as quickly as they have been.
Definitely. With Heritage partnering up with Wata, there's some systems that, obviously Wata does not grade yet. And I understand you do sell stuff that's raw sometimes because of that. Is there any game systems that you really, or consoles that you really look forward to when Wata gets to grading? If it's Game Gear or some of the other stuff, is there any specific, system that you're kind of excited to see when that comes to, being encapsulated?
I would say it's not necessarily for a particular console, but for one, I am excited about Game Gear. I hope that they start grading those soon. But for me, it's really more the oddly sized prototypes that I'm most excited to see encapsulated, just because I think that those things should be preserved as quickly as they can be. And I'm just excited to see what Wata comes up with in order to, encapsulate things like that.
Right now, Heritage, well, not right now, about a month ago, Heritage started doing the weeklies on Tuesdays, having its own individual start time, which to me is game changer, because before you used to have to wait through the comics to find video, when the video games start. Now we have a set time. How's that experience been with you? And I'm guessing you fought for that for quite some time.
Yes. I mean, it was always a goal for video games to eventually get their own sale, but I felt, and I know there were a lot of people at Heritage who felt similarly, that we would see participation maximize and excitement, increase if we were able to give games their own dedicated sale. Because it is difficult to sort of plan your evening around something, especially if you don't know what time it's starting. But yeah, I was definitely a big cheerleader in trying to make that happen, and I'm just glad that we were able to get that kicked off at the beginning of 2021, so we could start the year off on a good foot.
Well, it's definitely started with a bang. I mean, some of the games that are in the weekly is something I'd never imagined. I'm glad it's not on Monday, because I remember the week starts and before I know it, I'm like, oh no, I missed the weekly, the weekly auction. So Tuesday's a better day for me, but hopefully for others. I want to talk about it's Heritage had a Castlevania that just came up. It was a Rev A round seal of quality mid production 8.0 A+, sold for $38,400 for a weekly. Should we expect some big title games like this in the future, or is this kind of like a one-off? Because there's definitely quite a big sale for a weekly, right?
Yeah, it was. Actually, after that sold, I found out that not only was it a big sale for the weekly, but it was the 6th most expensive lot that has ever been sold in a weekly auction under the comics department. Yeah, video games are here to make their mark, that's for sure. But as far as expecting more games like that in the weeklies, I certainly wouldn't be surprised if we have more offerings like that in the future. I think that it just goes to show how much power that venue really has.
Well, I do have to mention, this is my John Hopper full disclosure moment, is that, I do consign with Heritage, and I do have games at Heritage at the moment. But the funny thing is I sent in a batch, and there's a lot of great games that got on the weeklies. And at this point, when I saw the signature, I had to admit, I'm like, okay, they deserve to be there. Like at the caliber this signature's at, the upcoming one, it's April 1st to the 4th, but I think Video Games is on Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific, 11 o'clock Central is the Friday session, and then there's a Sunday session. It's amazing how many great games are in this one auction. Everyone's saying this is the best auction to ever be held for video games, and they're saying might be the best one, even when we look down the road, the biggest one we will ever have. But what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I look at this auction, and while I was assembling it, I knew that it was going to be a hard one to top. Whether or not it can be, I guess that does sort of remain to be seen. I'd like to think we could top it. But, I mean, the lineup really is a force to be reckoned with. Every page of the floor session just seems to be made up of can't miss lots. And yeah, I certainly hope we can do it again. I'd like to think that we can, but I think it would be very tough. That's for sure.
So what's your thoughts on case packs and games coming to the market? What's your idea on supply of video games now that we're a little bit farther, and you probably see more of what's out there than most, being your position? What's your thoughts on supply in video games or scarcity?
So this may be a long answer.
Go for it. We got time. So.
Okay, yeah. So I recognize that at one point, there appeared to be a large number of games that, were new old stock. They came in case packs. But on the other hand, how many, sealed games are there really out there of a particular title? Like even for, say, the Atari 2600, a few thousand. And another collectible like U.S. coins, world coins, ancient coins, or, comics, that's barely a drop in the ocean when new material like that comes on the scene. So while it seems like a lot now because we're so early on in the life cycle of this, not life cycle, but the life of this market, I just think that as time goes on, it'll definitely start to take on a different appearance, and people will realize that a few thousand of even just one game, that's really not so many as far as field games are concerned.
Now, usually I ask, what inning of, say it's a baseball game and video game market, what inning we're in. For you, I'm going to ask, you mentioned, the life of the life of video games. If it's 100-year-old person, one is, newborn almost, and 100 is towards the end. What age do you kind of feel the market is? You mentioned early. Do you think we're teenagers yet? Do you think we're still adolescents? I mean, I know you don't think we're retired. We're not in retirement, so it starts getting a little bit more stale. But I'm just trying to think of we could go with baseball and innings, or if that's a little bit easier. But what's your thoughts?
I think the easiest way I can put it is this market is still, very young. There's times where it feels sort of like the Wild West. We're still learning, figuring things out every day, all of us, I think. And I think we've got a long journey ahead of us before this is going to be considered a more mature market.
Mm-hmm. So basically in diapers. I'm just kidding. No, it's very interesting. I think often conversations happen about how young this market really is. Though, yes, video games are sometimes 35 years old and people have been collecting for 20. And there's some really high prices, but the knowledge and the discoveries are just so young where, say, comic books, people find pedigrees. It wasn't till 40 years after, they were created, that 40, 50 years that some of these big discoveries were. So very interesting on the knowledge side you mentioned about, what we know and how little we know about some of this, and which is great. I think that's the fun of being involved, is that discovery sometimes. Is there anything that you're looking forward to? Are you looking forward to that stabilization when it's matured more, where we kind of, okay, this is kind of where we're at? Obviously right now is exciting because say Mario Kart 8.5 in this upcoming auction. I was talking to a friend, and the question was it going to end for 15,000 or 30,000? And no one knows. That's a big spread, like literally 100% difference. And no one is right or wrong there, I feel like, in this market.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing too. Sometimes, coming up with estimates for these sorts of things, especially if it's something we've never offered before and you don't even hear a whisper of a private sale, it can be a little difficult to figure out exactly what the expectation should be of where something should end up. But to actually answer the question, the thing I'm looking forward to most would have to be having a population report. I definitely think that knowledge is power, of course, and need more information to make informed decisions, I think, on what they want to collect, what they want to buy, whether or not like an 8.5 is a great grade for the game that they're looking at. Those are all questions that I think would be easier to answer with population data. I'm also looking forward to, being more sure of the timeline of certain variants. I mean, for Nintendo Entertainment System, while it's still a bit dense, I think that all the theories make sense. But for other games, for other consoles, I think we still have different blanks that we need to fill in. And I'm just looking forward to the community having more confidence in, which is early and which is late and that sort of thing.
Do you think for the population report, if you were to guess, do you think that will come out in 2021?
I certainly hope it does. I mean, I wish I could answer that question, but that's just not information I'm not even privy to that information.
Oh yeah, no, I figured none of us are. It's kind of one of those, I think that's the number one topic on a lot of conversations is, the over and under 2021, 2022. I know it's eventually, it's a good reason they don't release it too early, but what's too early? Is it already past that? I don't know. But with the population report, do you think there's titles that we might come down due to the populations? And do you think there's any consoles that you think are underappreciated due to the scarcity that it would probably show?
Since there are so many factors that go into why a game is valuable, it's hard to say how the population data would affect that. Like, for example, I think that certain sealed GameCube games are harder to come by than maybe they're given credit for. But whether or not knowing that would make any sort of difference on the demand, that kind of remains to be seen, just because that wasn't like a high-selling console for its generation. But aside from that, I don't necessarily think that knowing that there are more copies of a game is going to have a significantly negative impact on the price or a negative impact at all. For example, I mean, we've offered our fair share of Super Mario Brothers 3 sealed Right Bros. But I think the reason why that game had consistent demand is that, it's Super Mario Brothers 3. I mean, everybody loves that game. It's one of the defining games of that series. And so that also needs to be taken into account. I think that because of that, it'll always have value. Yeah, I mean, would it affect it? Maybe, but I think chances are low. But if anything, it could just give people more confidence in buying a 9.2 instead of sitting around and waiting for a 9.8. You know what I mean? So if anything, it could have a positive impact.
I want to take a step back and talk about, estimating games, because I do not envy that aspect, because I was wondering that, I don't know if I talked to you recently about it, or if there's another talk about, something like, say, Turtles in Time. Now, again, another disclosure, I own one, but, it took me a long time. I was like, I would love to get a made in Japan. And I thought, hey, if there's a 9.4 or 9.6 that came to market, I thought, most people would be shocked at the price it goes for. And that's something that you're mentioning, how do you value something like that hasn't hit the market and there's no comps, zero comps on that game. So how do you go about that? I mean, that has to be very difficult because at one point it's literally just a feel, I would assume, right?
I mean, it can be difficult depending on the game, but we luckily have a lot of data in our archives on the Heritage website to look at. So even if we haven't offered, let's say we hadn't offered a Turtles in Time before, just for the example's sake, I could look at that and say, well, this is probably a pretty tough game to come by, especially if I, haven't gotten any inquiries or anything like that. And, maybe I could ask some other longtime collectors what their experience has been and the frequency at which they've come across or the prices people are asking. I could also look at what other related games had sold for, so I might look at the pricing information on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1 for NES and the other games in that series to just sort of get a rough idea of what sort of price expectation we'd be looking at. So that's generally how it's done. I think one of the hardest things, though, is probably on titles that are particularly obscure, just because from what I understand of like the collecting community prior to, sort of this formalization of the market and sort of bringing it into a more pub spotlight, really rare sort of obscure titles were highly prized, and there's been this sort of reversal of like now people are focusing more on the games that everybody collectively loved as kids and were really relevant to pop culture. That's also been sort of an interesting perspective to look at it from, because price expectations, I think, have changed quite a bit from where they had back then because of that.
Well, it's interesting, mixing the estimates and the population into one, thought is that, the rare games that have kind of not followed the market in the nostalgic run right now with the population report, could have another resurgence because of how rare some of those titles are. So it'll be interesting of seeing if some of those games come to market after a population report and what a population report can, do for those games, because it definitely has, I would agree, taken a back seat to Mario, Pokemon, and the heavy hitters. Is there any games right now that you personally enjoyed playing? Have you had time for that?
So, I go through stages where I'm not playing a lot, and then I go through stages where, I try to pencil in as much time as possible to play. And, for a while, like everybody else in 2020, I was playing a lot of Animal Crossing on the Switch. And, I loved it. I've always been a huge Animal Crossing fan. I missed how mean the animals were on the GameCube version. I think that's like peak Animal Crossing behavior for the neighbors, or the villagers rather. I also been playing Spider-Man for PS4 and The Last of Us for PlayStation 4, just because I've been so obsessed with my Switch that I kind of neglected my PlayStation 4 for a while. So I'm just trying to sort of brush up on what's good and what's popular these days.
Now, is there a game that you put on when, say, you've had a bad day and you're like, hey, I'll play Grand Theft Auto, or, is there a game that is an outlet for you? Like, or is it kind of, hey, you stick on the games you're currently playing? I know in music, sometimes people put on, a heavy metal or something. Is there a video game that, is your stress release?
Yeah. Like a safe space.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's always been different at different points in my life. Like in college, it was definitely Skyrim, pretty much the entire time I was in college. But I don't think that's unusual for anyone that got really into Skyrim. You just played it and played it and played it. Recently, it was very much Animal Crossing, just because, it's just such a feel-good, relaxing game. I mean, it's not anything that, raises, stress hormones. It just kind of evens you out, that kind of thing. But other than that, I would have to say, it's a good question. It was probably Breath of the Wild most recently. That was peak Switch to me too. Is Breath of the Wild.
Such a great game. I mean, that game you could just, you just go look for temples or whatever they're called, and just I just love going to the top of a mountain and just jumping off with the, that was
Sailing over everything, getting a good eyeful.
Yeah, just sailing for a while. It's definitely. I bought the Switch just for that game at the time. Now I play other ones, but the Switch is a great system. I like the classic versions on it. Like I like that it makes it easy to play some of the classic games. I just beat Donkey Kong, so I'm very proud of myself.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
I have to say, I'm really terrible at NES and Super Nintendo games. I'm not shy about it. I do love those classic streaming services that they've added to the Switch. Like, I played Nightshade for the first time recently, and I was really impressed by the writing in that game, especially considering that it was for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Like, I was genuinely laughing about a lot of the jokes that they threw in there. Granted, I was not very good at fighting in the game, but I did enjoy the point and click aspects of it.
Oh, definitely. So how is it when you're out and about and someone asks you, what do you do? How is that conversation? I know I've had multiple jobs in my life. It's always interesting, what you do. How is that? I mean, because it's something that I would imagine you have to really explain. You can't give like I'm a consignment director at Heritage for video games. There's a follow-up there, it's going to be a long one. How is that for you? Yeah. Or would you rather just say, hey, I do something else, just not because you're not proud of it, but, that long conversation.
Well, I mean, I do always like mentally prepare for like follow-up questions, because I know that when I say, oh, I'm a collectible video game specialist, people usually kind of give me a funny look, like that doesn't make any sense. And, even if I just say, oh, I'm the consignment director for video games at Heritage Auctions, usually all they hear is video games. And they're like, oh, what video games have you made? And I'm like, yeah, I don't really do that. And then I have to like launch into a whole explanation. And then, either they're like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. Or they're like, oh, okay, whatever. And they don't really, get the thrill of the hunt of collecting or anything like that. So they're just like, oh, okay, well.
So do you ever have like a plan B of like, hey, I'm this, do you actually go through that conversation each time?
Like, do I ever just sort of give up and just say something else?
Well, like I was, up till the pandemic, I had a ticket brokerage company I owned for 15 years. And instead of saying ticket broker, I just said I was a drug dealer. It was so much easier. People understand it.
What?
Well, it was a joke, but like, it'd be so much easier to explain like, hey, I'm a drug dealer. People know what that is. But like a ticket brokerage, so you get tickets to and that's how I understand that question that comes to you. So like sometimes I would just, try to figure out, hey, I'm in sales or something like something boring to kind of just pass that, long conversation. When you get in those conversations, do you feel like, people, you look at their face and after you kind of explain it to them, they're kind of like, oh, wow, I didn't know that was a thing?
Sometimes people do react that way. I'm really proud of what I do, and I love what I do. So I do enjoy telling people about it, but it is pretty funny when people, just assume, oh, you make video games, just because that's the only thing they hear. But I'm always proud to explain.
Oh, yeah, no, I just imagine, like, sometimes you're talking to, like, a bank teller, not like a friend, like, you're talking to someone you care about, and you're, like, you're trying to go in and out, and you mention that, you're like, oh, God, here we go, I got to get out of here, I got to get to work, but, no, I mean, it's awesome what you do, and obviously you have a passion for the game, so, I mean, congratulations on being an expert and being able to professionally do what you love, and, I think that it's very admirable.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Signatures, are they pre-planned out for the year? Like, hey, there's one in April, one in June. Or is it kind of figured out with the scheduling of the other auctions? Is it like, because I know it's like every 3 months, right?
Yeah, we come up with the schedule the year prior. It's just preset throughout the year. Though the auctions are built in the months in between each one. Basically, as soon as this one closes, we'll be working on the next one, which deadline to consign to that one is actually April 27th. So just a few weeks after this current auction closes.
Yeah, and you do a lot. You also do the catalog, which is, if people don't get it, how do people get the catalog, and can they purchase it, or how do they go about getting that?
Yeah, they can actually order a copy of the catalog from our website. So if you just go to ha.com/c/catalog-orders, you can actually pick the catalog that you want to get. I think your first one is free, so that's a good way to go ahead and grab one if you'd like. We also have a PDF version of the catalog that's viewable online as well. Yeah, and also the catalog goes out to certain clients who it goes out to clients that bid with us. So if you are bidding on video games in our auctions and you don't receive the catalog, you can reach out to us and we can correct that for you.
And for people that don't know, the catalogs are awesome. Like, it's, if for a collector, I mean, it's literally like getting, I don't know, the Christmas catalog for the year, just because, like, okay, what made the cover, what made the inside cover, and you do the write-ups for the catalog, correct?
Yeah, I do all the floor lot descriptions for the most part for video games, and I sneak in a few, internet session descriptions as well.
Very cool. Seems like you're quite busy. So after a big signature auction, how do you treat yourself? I mean, do you treat yourself? Do you celebrate with the team? What happens?
I do try to celebrate after the auctions. Back before the pandemic, we would all, everyone that worked on the auction together would pretty much go out for a nice happy hour the night after. With things the way they are right now, that's not quite possible. But, I usually cook a nice dinner or get takeout and relax. On the weekends, I, just do my thing, go on walks, play video games, cook.
Well, I just imagine when you guys, went out to happy hour / dinner or whatever else. I could imagine that hopefully the bosses let everyone come in 2 hours late for the mini hangover. But
well, that's why we usually do it on a Friday, so we can just sort of take our time and chat about the results.
The bosses are like, have a hangover on your own time. No. So people don't miss it. The signature starts this Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific, 11 o'clock Central, noon Eastern. And that's for the first session. And that's usually the higher tier items. And then on Sunday, it's, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Valerie, it's at 11 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Central, 2 o'clock Eastern. Does that all sound about right?
Let me double check that.
No, it's all good. And that's Sunday for the second session. And yeah, take a look. Valerie's going to correct me in a moment, but this auction is literally just insane. You have the Hang Tab Mario 4th edition right now, currently sitting at 310,000. You have a Mega Man second variant of sitting at 75 grand. You have, so many crazy things in it. The Mario 9.8 Right Bros. You just go down this list. Tyson 9.6 A++. There's so much. There's more than one Tyson in this auction. Someone mentioned that yesterday to me. I was like, yeah, that's how crazy an auction is. There's multiple steel Tysons. Was the dates and time sound about right? April 2nd, Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific?
Yep, that's right. It's April 2nd at 11 a.m. Central, and then the online bidding session. The online-only bidding session is on April 4th at 1 p.m. Central. So you were correct. Nice.
I used to deal with different time zones, so that's my specialty. That's what I'm good at. But no, I'm really excited. And also if people want to join myself and others, we'll be on Clubhouse during that for both those under the Club Video Game Collectors. We usually chat during it and just kind of watch together, and it's just a group conversation if anyone wants to join that. And yeah, so anything you'd like to get in there for this upcoming signature? Any games that we're excited about specifically? It's going to be something else, I believe.
We do have our list of a short list of 5 lots that we think are going to be the highest performing video game lots in the sale, which of course is the Hang Tab Mario, the Mike Tyson, the Mega Man, and the Sandshrew Pokemon Red. and so on. But as far as like my personal favorite, I'd have to say the 9/8 A++ Pokemon Crystal. That's actually like my favorite installment in the series, and it is one of the hardest ones to find in nice condition, especially sealed. Whoever takes that home is really lucky. It's a great piece.
You will have Valerie's envy.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll call it the curator's pick, and I mean that one's crazy rare, and then it's pretty much the best grade you can get. So yeah, so if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way?
The best way to get in touch with me is through email, and it's Valarie, VALARIE M as in Mary @ha.com. So just ValerieM@ha.com.
Awesome. Yeah, anyone that's looking to consign with Heritage for the video games, Valarie she heads that up. So make sure to hit up Valarie and see if Heritage is the best place for you to sell your games, and definitely check out the catalog. It is something I know myself and others really look forward to. I honestly look at the cutoff date. I'm like, okay, 1 week away, I get my catalog. No, it is that good. It really is. So thank you I know you put a lot of effort into that and the auctions and what goes into it. So thank you so much for all your hard work.
Well, thank you. We couldn't do it without our consigners, that's for sure.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for coming here today, and thank you for everyone listening. And as always, enjoy the hunt.